Just Mopar Joe made a comment to me that I should do a video on gear ratios. Sounds simple enough, but really isn't. So how does one go about selecting the right gear ratio? Seems people like 411 gears a lot, maybe 456s. How about for this? Cruising along in our van, humming right along. 456 is right for this. But when I'm pulling a 5,000-pound van out of the weeds up a hill, I put it in 4 low, and then I have about a 642 gear ratio. That's about right, isn't it? But when you're trying to build a drag truck, you shouldn't be going down the road 55 mile an hour in second gear. That's what 271s and a 31-inch tire does for you. Let me go to third. There we go. Now it's lugging. And back in the old days, this was the common sight of a family cruiser. Almost 16, about 23, 2400 RPM. Then along come the overdrive. A much more comforting thought for gas mileage and engine relaxation, as long as you got the torque to pull it. And then they started doing 5-speed automatic transmissions. They already had 5-speed manuals. That way a feller has a good takeoff gear and a good interstate across Nebraska gear. By the time we get up in the newer years, now we're up to 8, 9, and 10-speed transmissions. So when we're talking about gear ratios, as you can see, there's no one answer. But assuming we're talking about older cars, older Mopars, older Fords, Chevrolets, maybe even a Datsun. What is the right gear? Only the owner can decide that. In one car, I pulled 430s out, put in 391s that had a mild 360. Can you believe that ET stayed the exact same and the mile per hour stayed the exact same? I'm going to say it this way, and this is my opinion. Everyone's got one. If you're building a bracket car that you're going to race 120 times through the race season, my opinion is build it to where you cross the line, have your gear ratio to where you're about 200 RPMs before your shift point or at shift point. So in other words, if you shift at 6,400 RPMs, you want to cross the line in top gear at about 62 to 6,400 RPMs. That'll help your car live longer. If you're going for the best ET possible and that's all you care about, well, you'll bump your gear up a little more than that. But again, if you're racing 1/8 mile, it's going to be different than if you're racing 1/4 mile. As you can see, only the owner can decide the use of the car. And the use of the car will be what determines it. Is it a street car? Is it a street strip car? Is it a classic cruiser that'll never ever have the accelerator pressed to the floor? Is it a four-wheel drive? Every one of these cars are going to have a different gear ratio. It's just so much for a guy to think about. Only the feller that owns the car can come up with the right answer and what purpose he has in mind for the car. Then turbochargers, they make a whole world of difference too when you're picking out your gear ratio. Them guys just like to have a highway geared car and just let that boost just push them and let the torque push them. Height of the tire is a huge when it comes to picking a gear ratio and affecting your gear ratio. And really, hurts my mind. I think I'll cover this back up. And
So when you determine the purpose of the car, it'll be pretty easy for you to come to the conclusion of the gear ratio.
And when it's travel time, I like my motors to be relaxed. That's why so many are putting overdrives in their classic cars these days. I think there's something wrong with my head.
Something else.